And this starts it all over again. And we can put this down here. I'm going to put this over here. Ooh. I'm going to put this over here. And then I should be able to now bring this down and get 2. There we go. Now I usually like to just collapse everything and get myself back to a good state, and then essentially start from there again. So by now you should see the general pattern and see how we can actually speed it up. As of right now, we're actually using clicking on a button to basically make the shape go downwards. But what we now need to do is add a timer so that the shape basically descends by itself. We'll still create the shape, but once the shape is added to the surface, it basically starts descending till it wedges automatically by itself without us having to click a button. We'll add a dispatcher timer. Then when components are loaded or after they're loaded, we should basically just set up the timer. All right, and then in here, what I want to do is I just want the active shape to descend. Right, and obviously there should be an interval associated with this. Right now, basically it'll just go super fast. So we can set up a game interval, and that game interval is actually what we would use later on when we want to speed the game up or slow the game down, right? So it's basically the game speed. And I think it needs to be a double. Dope. Then in here I can do boom. So basically, based on game speed, we will go through and we will change this, and the game speed can be specified by somebody. So over here in the main, I can actually set that game speed to 1 second. So that sets it up, but it doesn't actually start it. So how do I want to start this now? Let's think about it. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do void start gravity and public void stop gravity. Okay, so when you start the gravity, it's just gonna do the game timer start. I should probably have a Boolean value that indicates that. So then over here, true. And then we'll basically do the opposite here. All right, so then over here, once we create our first shape, then we start the gravity. So if the game is running, then we can start the, and we're not even going to disable it. And else we stop the gravity. Bit nicer. So at this point, I should have something that feels like the Tetris game. Start the test. There we go. And that shows that it basically all right, perfect. Another thing we need to do is when a shape is wedged, right? After we, before we evaluate the lines, there are some aspects that we need to consider, right? So one aspect is that as the game keeps going, it needs to get more difficult. And one way of making it more difficult is to make the game faster. Another way is to have more scarcity, more of the same shapes appearing over and over again, so that if you're looking for a particular shape, it might be difficult for you to get, right? So you have to work around, and it allows you to build up a pile. So to that end, we actually also we have the game speed. We also need an acceleration associated with the game. And the acceleration will start from 1.0. And then basically after a game is wedged, what we want to do is we want to actually change the interval at that point in time. So the other thing we want to do is we want to expose the ability to shift the shape around programmatically. Right, so we're gonna and then we can actually add now that we have an acceleration, we can add a turbo. make it go faster. And if we're gonna add a turbo, then when the shape gets wedged, the acceleration needs to go back. All right, so shifting left is pretty straightforward. And I can literally just copy this across the board. Shift right, rotate it, and then when you turbo it, basically we're doing the same thing, but because we have a little bit more code, we're gonna group this in here. So we'll make it twice as fast. And then reset the interval. And then just call descend. Get it going. And then we probably want to notify any hosts that that turbo has been called. So if they wanted to apply some kind of sound effect, they can. Now, the other thing that we're going to have to handle is scenarios where you try to add an item, you want to add a shape, but the shape can't be added. And I'm going to just go through and basically add that last piece to this, to all the different controls. We'll do it for one control, we'll do it for the eye control, and then we can add it for every other control. Right, so public bool the idea here is that we're going to check if that shape can be added before we actually add it. And then over here, when you pass in a shape, we essentially just draw it, right? And drawing it means, let's take eye as an example. Drawing it means going and looking at the default state that it's going to be in. So for example, in this case, this is what it's going to be in. It just occupies that space. So we just need to take this and just check. Of course, can be added should probably have the game field in it like everything else because it's needed. Which means we have to go back to the shape and add it. going to do it slightly differently this time, just because the other way is kind of laborious. Actually, I see that this will work. So this is basically the same thing. I'm saying that the shapes that I need to draw need to be unoccupied in order for me to return, in order for me to be able to draw it. Otherwise, I cannot draw it, right? So, and again, that's row -1, row, right? Like that. That's just for it to exist. And then what I'm going to do here is if added shape can be added, this. And I'm going to rename this, call it new shape. So if the new shape can be added, then it's going to add it. Else, I'm going to fire the no available space event. Let me fire a no available space event. And that basically indicates that the game is over. All right, there's no more space. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to tackle this whole idea of creating shapes. We don't want the shapes to be created outside of the game field. We basically want the game field to create the shapes. So obviously when a shape is wedged, a new shape is going to be added, right? So we can start by going to that area where we actually call the wedging, right? Before the new shape is actually added. Right? And so basically, whenever the wedge actually happens, the line's evaluated, the shape wedge is passed on to someone else. But here, right, we need to actually create a new shape. And also I suppose when you start the game, it should initially create a shape to get going, right? There we go. So this has already given me a general ID for everything. So L is 1, J is 2, on and on and on. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, basically, right? So let me first create a random. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Let's get this out of there, and I'm going to actually rename this. Okay. And I'm going to move this random out of here and put it up here. And so okay. So that's the first thing out of 100. The next thing I'm then gonna do is basically find the shape ID by doing a modulus 7. There's 7 shapes. So just to be more, so we don't have any hard-coded values. And then basically, based on the shape ID, based on what's created here, I will now go to my shapes field. Bam. Right, so this will return me one of these based on some random indicator. And now I do want some kind of measure of complexity to it, because as it stands right now, if I just return this, it's just, it's based on a randomness. But obviously over time, as you start playing, it's not just about the game speed, it's also about the rarity of things appearing. Right, so I'm gonna add a shape drought to this, right? Shape drought max, I should say, right? This is gonna be the maximum allotted time that you can go without a shape being presented, right? Because even though this is random, right, at some point, if we're not getting certain shapes, we basically want to know that that shape is not there, and then we want to basically present it, right? So let's create something that we can use to manage that shape frequency, and it'd almost be like a counter of some kind, right? For each individual shape, every time that the shape is not presented, we go through and we increment that value on that shape. And then whenever the shape does get presented, we basically set it to 0. So we can just call it a shape frequency. And I'm trying to see if I should make it more complicated. Because we can obviously do this with a dictionary and a queue and just use the count. In fact, let's just do that. Right. So what are we doing here? We're just creating like basically a simple shape frequency dictionary that we can load up when we start the game. So let's load it up here. Whenever gravity starts, we'll basically load it up, right? And all it's gonna do is just loop through each one of these right now. And then just basically create a queue for each one. right? So basically, each time a shape is added, we basically just add 0 to this queue. It really doesn't matter. And then at some point, if the queue's length is larger than that drought amount that we're tracking, then we know that we should basically just just show that item at this point. Just show one of the items that, and then you can go one by one and do that, right? Let's go back to next shape. So now we have the selected shape over here. We know what it is. But before we select the shape, what we want to do is we want to see if there are any routes to address, right? And then the droughts would change the shape ID in one form or another, right? So to do that, we can basically just loop through Okay, so we're going to loop through here, and we're basically going to see for any one of these items actually the keys that I'm looking at, right? So for any one of these, so basically I'm going through that shape frequency list, and I'm basically saying, hey, for this shape, ID 0, ID 1, what's the count? How many items have I added to the queue, right? If the count is greater than the drop max, whatever you're gonna set, hey, don't take 10 turns before I see an L shape or a J shape or whatever, then basically I'm gonna reset it for that item, right? So then shape ID would basically then just reset to the shape index, right? So what I'm saying at this point is just reset the, right? So I'm not gonna use this random shape. I'm actually gonna use a shape for, I'm gonna use an ID for a shape that we haven't seen for a long time. And then for that specific item, I'm gonna clear it and start it all over again, right? So and then I can basically start all over again. I don't care. Once you get one, you go through, and then the next time that a next shape is coming up, we'll go through this process again. So eventually, something will work. Something's gonna give. And then on the flip side of it, after I've now selected my shape, this shape is selected, let's now go through, and we have to once again loop through these guys, right? So I'm going to increment the drop number for every shape other than the one, right? So basically everybody else, we're registering to say, hey, by the way, I wasn't picked. can just put 0 in, it doesn't matter. So basically what it's going to go through, I'm going to go through the whole list, and for everything that isn't the one that I selected, I basically increment the frequency. So every time you pass through, it's going to check to see if you've been selected. And if you've been selected, then you're all set. If you have not been selected, then basically we're going to flag and record that you haven't been selected. And over time, based on this number, every shape should be shown in a pretty consistent manner. And it also gives us the ability to increase the levels. Obviously, as the levels go up, the drought can actually, the maximum drought time can actually go up, and the speed can go up. And those are the levers that we can use to control the levels of the game. So once this is done, we can basically now set this to the current preview shape. And then maybe we can add a method here, or an event next shape cal. It's starting to get big. See if I can pull these down. So they can be easily seen. There we go. So these are all the events, right? So next shape calculated. Go here and then just call that perfecto. So that means that we don't need the preview shape, because preview is being called, preview is being created up here. And then basically when the shape is added, what it's going to do is check if the shape can be added, right? So maybe I make it the current preview shape, whether it can be added. And then we basically set the active shape into the current preview shape. And then we call next shape again. Shape. All right, so basically we've internalized the shape creation. So the active shape does not have to be visible. Current preview shape perhaps, but active shape does not necessarily have to be visible. So basically what we want is we want for when you call generate next shape, we want it to actually specify a preview shape, and then that preview shape we would then add some attributes to here, right? And then, when we make it an active shape, and then go from there. So the first time we do it, we're going to generate 2. So here's my preview shape, and here's my main shape. Then when we come in here, we're going to take these, and we will actually do it out here. So basically we generate the shape, and then we start the next shape. When we start the next shape, that's where it specifies the row and column, and then it says whether or not that can be added. We then need a way to specify that the active shape is now the preview shape, or that the preview shape is now the active shape. So over here, so what we're now doing is that we're saying that the active shape is equal to the current preview shape, and then we're resetting the current preview shape. Remember that when we call start next level, the active shape, or start next shape, the active shape will then basically go in and change this name to initialize. I don't like start. So this initializes the active shape. So you set the row, set the column, see if it can be added. Go in and set everything. When it's wedged, it goes through and it converts the current shape into the active shape, generates a new current shape, and then we go through the cycle again. And then over here, it has to start by generating a next shape. And keeping that on the sidelines while it basically also generates a preview. Then it initializes. Let's see if this works. Okay, so it seems to be working. Okay, so that seems to be working. And now for good measure, I'm going to actually create another one of these. That we'll use to display the preview shape. Okay. And I'm going to put this bad boy inside of a border. So I can play around with it. And these two I will put inside of a stack panel. All right, and so there's not going to be a draw here. Any of these. Game width will be 4. Game height will be 4. Let's make it 6 by 6. I'll take this and put it in the stack panel. Orientation will be horizontal. Don't need that. Okay, so that should slim down, so to speak, once we start it. Matter of fact, let's just test that out here. There we go. Okay. Okay. And then in here, what I would then do is I can do control preview dot shape, and then game field dot current preview shape. There you go. All right. we need some way to clear every single control. So game field needs its own clear. So and the purpose here is that we want it to basically loop through everything and remove and just clear everything out. So we're starting from scratch. All right, we're making some progress here. All right, looking good. Now, one of the things that I do not like is I don't like that stupid border on it. So let's change it. Red is a very bad color. Okay, so this makes it a little bit of a transparent color. That looks pretty cool. But the border does not look good. Why don't we do it on the game field itself? Okay, looking a little bit better now. So this looks good. Now, everything we've been doing thus far, has been running off of these buttons here. Let's switch it and have it use the keypad. All right, so the easiest way to do this is to override the key down event. And then in here, basically, we have a switch statement. Left, right, up, and then down. So left will basically shift left. Right will obviously shift right. Up will rotate the active shape. And then down will basically do a turbo. And we actually need a key up as well, because if I lift up the key for the turbo, I want it to stop. I don't want it to just start and then go all the way to the end. So basically we need some kind of end turbo. And that takes that, and that should go back to the normal speed, and everything else remains the same. Then over here, I'm just gonna go end active shape turbo. All right, let's see how this works now. Start the test. There we go. Changing as needed. And look at that. If I push down, then it stops and goes normal. Okay, so the controllers are working fine. And we're gonna add another grid up top. That's maybe 100. This is now row 1. This is row 2. And the main row would have a label. Shape shifter. make this top one auto. That way it actually shows off everything. And let's try this again. Here we go. And we need another one for the score. This becomes 2, this becomes 3, this becomes 1. And this becomes 40. And we can put it into a stack panel, make it horizontal, put that guy in there, take this and put it in there. Set the level. Those are the two things we're going to worry about, the score and the level. This margin is going to be 20. And that's not going to be anything. And this margin up here is also going to be 20. Let's see how this looks. Okay, so this is all just icing on the cake. I'm gonna make it green. Honestly, I'm gonna do the same thing here. Set the corner radius. Set the background internally, solid color brush. I'm gonna use Gainsborough. And opacity, I'm gonna make 0.1. Then I'm gonna give this guy a padding of 20. All right. And now in here, I can set the game field.score and game field.level changed. Okay. All right, let's see how this looks now that we've added all the capabilities for tracking the score. Okay, and that score that we're seeing is obviously based on what we specified when we were setting the control. So that's why it's showing us that. Perfect. That's 2 lines, that's why. It's 10 per line. So that should be 40. Okay, so the final thing that we're going to be doing is basically adding controller support. So controller support works with the Xbox controller, and I assume there's some kind of controller standard that they all follow, but we're going to enable the Xbox controller here, and then we'll also, obviously, once we're done with that, we'll then see about actually publishing this to the Xbox. So by default, when you set up the controller and pair it, it does give you some capability. So I know that we're not going to need left, right, and rotate, so we can get rid of that. And that means getting rid of them here. And also getting rid of this, test right left. Now let's run this with the Xbox controller and see how it works. And you just have to take my word for it that this is functioning properly. Okay. Perfecto. So what's happening here is that that's going fast because the acceleration is going fast. So over here, I'm going to do a new message dialog. So what I ideally want to do now is that I don't want any controls on the main page, right? I don't want to start the game and be playing it. So I actually want like a landing page. That's going to be the default page that we go into. Okay, and then we can go into our app control and we can set it so that the root frame navigates to the landing page instead. And then on the landing page, we then take this button right here. And then from the frame, we basically navigate to type of the main page, which is basically the game that we're going to be playing. And we should probably make this a little bit bigger. All right, so that starts the game and that navigates here. And then actually over here, when the page loads, then the game should actually start. But we know that the game won't be running, so it doesn't matter there. Perfecto. And so on main page, we obviously don't need this guy anymore. I'm gonna leave this empty. I'm not gonna get rid of it. What I'm gonna try first of all is I'm gonna try just having a button here. It's really not gonna do anything. I'll set the opacity to 0 and see if that gives me that focus that I need. And that was it. If you made it to the end of this video, congratulations. You now have the tools needed to rebuild this game and take it and use some of the principles that you've learned here to build your own cool game that's probably going to supersede anything that a game like Tetris has ever done. The entire code base that we use here can be found on GitHub, so go check it out. Links are in the description below. If you like this kind of content, please like, share, subscribe. Happy coding, and as always, have a blessed day.